Thank you, Andy. And that begs the question, how many of you have language or have lived in Moldova or nearby countries by a show of hands? All right. How many in Moldova in particular? All right. That gives us a sense of who our audience is today. Thank you. Well, His Excellency Igor Munteanu was appointed Moldovan ambassador to the U.S. and Canada in 2010. He had previously been executive director of the Institute for Development and Social Initiatives, a leading think tank in Moldova, where he worked in economic analysis, public sector reform, and private consulting with various Moldovan, EU, and U.S. organizations. He also served as a senior expert and assistant to the director of the International Foundation for Election Systems office in Moldova since 1994, and provided analysis and policy recommendations for the Moldovan presidency, serving as head of the Political Analysis Division in 2003, and organizing the first conference on NATO-Moldova partnership in November 1993. Munteanu has more than 10 years' experience directly assisting in municipal government reform, strategic planning, and business planning, and he has participated in several consultancy and monitoring assignments with the Council of Europe, Institutional Committee of the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities, and Freedom House, as well as various UN bodies. In addition, he was a political commentator for the BBC RFE-RL, that's Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and Romanian language programs from 1996 to 2010, and developed the university courses Public Policy, Theory and Practices, and State, Society, and its Actors at the Academy of Economic Studies. He received a BS in Communications from the State University of Moldova, an MS in Political Sciences and Institutional Analysis from SNSPA in Romania, and a PhD in Law from the International Free University of Moldova. A Romanian native, he is fluent in Romanian, Russian, English, and some French and Estonian. Today's presentation is Moldova at the Crossroads of East and West, the Challenges of European Integration. Please join me in welcoming to BYU Ambassador Munteanu.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really privileged to assist and to attend this session. It is a very good joy for me to visit your state. I heard a lot of good things about your university, and I'm trying to present to you today some policy lines about the Moldovan orientation towards West, in particular the relationship with the European Union. And I will try to develop a sense of what exactly is the trajectory that Moldova is pursuing. And of course, I will rely strongly on the technologies you use at the university. The continental map changed dramatically as a result of enlargement and waves of integration. Europe, that was under the protection and security umbrella of the NATO, emerged from the boots of the post-Cold War as a stronger partner of the West, as a pillar of the West, and in fact it became a destination for the new countries that emerged from the socialist and Soviet camp. Central European countries emerging from the socialist camp created for themselves a strong impetus to integrate with the West through a dual integration, NATO and the European Union. Of course, the first thing to resolve, to settle for themselves, was to return to Europe. That was the slogan in Poland. That was also the slogan in the Baltic states. That was also the slogan in Romania and Slovakia. Everywhere where the people considered and the political elites considered that the socialist system of governance was not appropriate for these entities, for these nations. And therefore the return to the West, the return to Europe, was considered a kind of sign of justice. The same was to a large extent experienced in Moldova. By the time of 1991, 1992, when the Republic of Moldova emerged as an independent state from the Soviet Union, we saw the impetus to reintegrate with the Europe as a kind of natural call, as a kind of natural trajectory. Of course, there were two important elements why the model of governance in the West, in the European Union, attracted us. First of all, European Union is perceived to be a very rich place. And people, of course, they vote with their higher aspirations, higher expectations. And of course, in statistical terms, as you can see from this slide, European Union is a very important producer of global wealth. It is also an important anchor of the Western economy. European economies account for half of the 10 wealthiest ones. Europe accounts for half of the United States investments abroad and remain the most important source of investments in the United States. And, European Union is also an affluent actor in the international organizations, since two of the members, France and UK, are members of the Security Council. All these elements prevail when ordinary people and elite make a rational calculus, a kind of calculation of the benefits if they join European Union. In the last decade, European Union started to think in a very serious way what to do with their neighborhood. And there are several neighborhoods. First of all, there are neighborhoods in the south with the Mediterranean coast or the North African coast. And of course, the North African entities, which are neighbors to the European Union, they always aspire to get larger trade with the European Union, but never say that they are willing to integrate with the West, with the European Union. They do not show any kind of predilections or identities to join culturally or in political terms the West. The situation is absolutely different in the East. The East meaning Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, to some extent Armenia and Azerbaijan. The previous waves of integration in Central Europe is seen as a precedent for changing the societies, for changing the states and changing the benefits for the ordinary people. And if you can see from this map where Moldova is located, we are right in the middle of an important wave of transformation. And this transformation has the name of an European policy, Eastern Partnership. Eastern Partnership emerged as an initiative concocted by Swedish, Polish, and the Baltic states, because they say we should not forget our neighbors in the East alone. The transition which is taking place in their countries is very difficult, is very painful. The state does not function according to the benefits the citizens expect from their states. Let's have a sense of responsibility for this region. And in 2009, the European Union has approved a policy towards Eastern European region, which is called Eastern Partnership. The Eastern Partnership has important benefits. First of all, it provides powerful incentives to transform the societies and the economies through cooperative agreements. For instance, if Moldova is part of the Eastern Partnership, it receives a lot of benefits in terms of trade with European Union. As a result, our trade is increasing, and of course the most active segments of the society, business community, public institutions, private sector at large, they receive more benefits to develop themselves. In addition to that, the European Union is providing a lot of incentives in financial terms to the budgetary sector, to the transformation of the agencies and the ministries of the central administration, making them more responsible, more accountable to the ordinary people. And of course, it also creates a framework for political and security dialogue, which is very important for us. All the countries in East have an acute sense of insecurity. First of all, insecurity is explained by the fact that we have a very strong neighbor in the north, which is Russian Federation. The Russian Federation is keeping a sharp eye on what is happening in its neighborhood. They call it Ближнее зарубежье, or close neighborhood. And of course, they do not want to be disputed as a hegemonical entity in the in East Europe. they try to promote the Russian Federation, the concept of a vital space for the Russian Federation. Of course, it's an objective, obvious, and unavoidable clash of interest. Our states want to become more westernized. The European Union is promoting its own policy of creating bridges of communication, of trade, of institutional dialogue, and the Russian Federation is more interested in keeping the status quo. The status quo is not very appealing, because status quo means still a vulnerability to the economy, existing dependency. For instance, Ukraine, Armenia, and Moldova are very dependent in energy terms. And we import a lot of energy as gas, for instance, from the Russian Federation. And of course, we pay the largest amount of money for gas, having or fearing every winter that the Russian Federation will cut off the supply of gas, and we will remain in the middle of the winter with no alternative supply. Speaking about the other perception, of course, the Russian Federation has its own fears or chimeras. One of the most important chimera for the Russian Federation is that all the policies around, which are promoted by the West, they try to replace Russian Federation. They try to undermine the geopolitical importance of the Russian Federation. And they try to weaken the global attributes of a state that was several or 2 decades ago a global player. And of course, usually perceives the adoption of the European neighborhood policy as a threat in itself. Usually, our governments and our states, also the bureaucracy in the European Union in Brussels, they try to adopt a very conciliatory style with the Russian Federation. Let's work together for creating solutions to the existing troubles. Let's engage the Russians. Let's create a space for common neighborhood. But of course, there are limitations to this kind of inclusive approach, because Russians feel that all these policies very close to its neighborhood, very close to its borders, will create less opportunities for the administration to act stronger when they want to react. And for instance, long before the European Union became more assertive in promoting its policy towards eastern neighbors in Eastern Europe, Russia perceived the most important threat in NATO. They say, well, the European Union is doing some little things. It is not of great importance for us. But particularly in the last 2 years, after the introduction of the Eastern Partnership, European Union became the foe. European Union is becoming even more associated with the undermining of the Russian importance, because the European Union is transforming geography. It is not only announcing intentions to cooperate at a higher level with all the governments in the region, but it is transforming the way how the governments act and interact. We call in Europe European model of governance. What does it mean? It means more transparency, it means more accountability, it means, of course, more control over the autonomy of the judiciary. The elements which are largely non-Russian in governance. Okay, this is the map of the Eastern Partnership. As you can see below, there is a line of partners. European Union does not set up borders or spaces of vital interest. European Union usually creates frameworks of integrating with the individual countries, and they use a very important principle. First of all, the principle of more for more. If the governments perform in some of the key areas, the assistance coming from the European Union is increasing. If the government is not very much interested to pursue any kind of commitment, for instance, the support is dropping up. The support is going to the key areas in the competitive business, in the public administration, in the local governments, in the budgeting of education, in all the areas around. And European Union use the so-called NPI, the instrument for neighborhood, the financial instrument for neighborhood. According to the estimates, every year the budgeting for the partners is increasing as a way to leverage more influence and the performance of the individual countries. What is here also evident is that the European Union is expanding. It is obvious. But it is expanding not as they have the European Union expanded in the last decade. Up to 2007, when Romania entered into the European Union, European Union called these directly waves of enlargement. Today, nobody in Europe calls waves of enlargement. Why? Because the public in European Union is not very happy with the new enlargements. To some extent, it is an elite-driven process. But nevertheless, it is an enlargement. Why? Because the agreements that Moldova, Ukraine, also Georgia is right now negotiating, they incorporate a lot of acquis communautaire. Acquis communautaire means legislation, normatives, and standards brought from the European Union and incorporated into the national legislation. Of course, sometimes it's very difficult to explain to an American auditorium what is the need for acquis communautaire. In Europe, the standards and regulations represent a very important heritage of the common European Union. This model of governance, with a lot of standards and regulations, helped the European nations to come together after 1957, when the first union was created. The European Union started to incorporate new states in order to become more affluent, to become more assertive, and to become more for keeping the former enemies inside of a political union. And that helped very much. After the Second World War, it was no any war in the European continent. Of course, thanks to the permanent presence and commitment of the United States, but also thanks to the attractivity of this model of European governance. This is also a very important element of attraction for our nations. But of course, the European Union is seen as an enemy, or is seen as a kind of rival to the traditional Russian interest in the neighborhood. And as a result of that, people judge according to the benefits coming from the European Union or from the offer of the Russian Federation. The ENP, which is the European Neighborhood Policy, was launched in 2003. It evolved, it progressed into two directions: an offer to the Mediterranean partners and also an offer to the Eastern European neighbors. Today, the ENP is sometimes called free M, money movement market, plus political dialogue with the individual national governments. In addition to the money, to the benefits, financial benefits that is provided to the national governments, the European Union use a plethora of soft power tools. And soft power tools means a kind of Europeanization of the habits, of the practices, and of the aspects of the functioning of a state. It is quite attractive because nobody is imposing by force something which is not accepted by the population, but by soft persuasion, by Europeanization, the European Union is creating a ring of friends. And at the end of the day, the ring of friends is the slogan that has been largely advertising for the engagement of the European Union in the last decade. What exactly the governments or the national governments do when they have to respond to this policy of the European Union? We in Moldova try to approach European Union through a kind of preemptive approximation. And what do we mean by preemptive approximation? We integrate European acquis communautaire even when Brussels does not request that. Why? Because we set for ourselves a target. We want to be integrated as an European Union member in a mid-term perspective, and this is good for the citizens of our country. Therefore, we already today are integrated in several communities or inner circles of the European Union. Today, Moldova is integrated into the European energy community. That creates a lot of space for cooperating with the European Union. We have to protect our borders. We have also to protect our energy security. We are part of the European aviation community. As a result of that, we can use cheaper flights between Moldovan cities and European cities. As a result of that, we are becoming more and more integrated into the European administrative space, which is quite important in terms of benefits to the citizens and also about the sense of identity of the population. You can see that European Union is not speaking about enlargement, but in fact the policy that it produces and reproduces through the cooperation with our countries, with Ukraine or Moldova, for instance, they are replicating the paradigm of integration that has been used in the first decade of transition when Hungary and Poland and Slovakia became full-fledged members of the European Union. So step by step, incremental policies, this is the term that is always used in connection to the European policy, is taking place. And Europe is still keeping a very important attraction to the ordinary people. Attraction in terms of benefits related to the market, but also in terms of visa liberalization. Everyone in Moldova and Ukraine, they want to travel freely in Europe. This is not only a part of the identity, this is just business. This is just creating more cooperation links with universities. This is about the freedom of individuals which feel themselves Europeans. And in Europe, of course, the ideas of identity and borders have a very special meaning. This is the pathway or the paradigm of integration into the European Union. We started with a very primitive agreement in 1994 related to TASIS. That was a very just a technical support agreement signed between our government and European Union. But already in 2005, we signed the first action plan of sectorial integration with the European Union. Already in 2010, we started the first negotiations of the free trade agreement and visa liberalization. And in 2013, we finished the negotiations. And in Vilnius on 28th and 29th of November this year, we will have the association agreement initialed, and in 2014 we will sign up the association agreement with the European Union. This will provide full access to the European market. We already have 55% of our goods exported to the European Union. It will go, however, beyond the trade links and trade benefits. It will create an important incentives for the Moldovan government to integrate its sectorial subsystems to the European Union. Just to give you an example, research and development. There are important funds of the European Union dedicated to research and development. We will have access to it. The European Union will provide free access to the Moldovan agricultural goods to the European Union. And this is quite important. So geography speaks for itself. It creates more benefits for it. What is the Russian response to this kind of benchmarks? Of course, Russia cannot contemplate only that somebody is providing more incentives for transformation than it can provide. And as you can see, we, as a small country, our population of Moldova is about 4.1 million inhabitants, a little bit more than Utah, but in size, of course, we are 2 or 3 times smaller than your state. Between Romania, which is already a member of the European Union, and Ukraine, that is following the same pattern of integration with the European Union, we do not simply have any kind of alternative projects. So we are cooperating with Ukraine only to accelerate the integration to the European Union. And as you can see, a line in Russian language, we call it duga nestabilnosti. For those who speak Russian, this is quite telling, foretelling. This is the line of the regional conflicts in the former Soviet Union. It starts with Transnistria, which is part of the Republic of Moldova. It goes through Simferopol and Sevastopol through Ukraine, the Crimean Peninsula, and afterwards it entered into the territory of Georgia, which by the way of circumstances, Abkhazia and South Ossetia became recognized by the Russian Federation after the 2008 war launched by the Russian Federation, and it ends in Nagorno-Karabakh. The instability line is the heritage of the Soviet Union, because Transnistrian conflict started in 1992. It was a kind of revenge of the Soviet censure against the call for independence in Moldova. The same started in Crimea, but since Crimea supply was regulated from the continental plateau, it was weaker. It was a weaker construction of separatism that was in Transnistria. The worst situation happened in Georgia, because Abkhazia and South Ossetia, after continuous attempts to separate themselves, they ended up as quasi-recognized entities, only by Russia and some islands. But generally, it is right now the time when the Russian Federation is installing border pillars or border milestones in these territories. So what is Transnistria? Because speaking about the integration with the European Union, we have to speak about our internal troubles. And having a separatist conflict in the territory of Moldova, we have to think twice what will be the reactions of Russia and how we can be smarter and engage local population, business community, active segments of the population in order to reintegrate our country. Population of this small segment of territory, which is Transnistria, is about 500,000 in formal terms, in statistical terms. In fact, they have less than 300,000 of inhabitants. The rest simply left the region. For 20 years, the population was largely suppressed by the local administration and by the ordinary Maslow, in brackets, needs, daily needs. Being unrecognized, the region cannot develop itself. It can only survive through important and generous subsidies coming from the Russian Federation. The Russian Federation supplies money to this separatist regime, but also keeps an important army in the region. And this is the most important obstacle to the reintegration of this part of Moldova. What is, just to give you another example, usually the Russian Federation claims that they are pursuing their policies in order to safeguard the Russians living in the region of Transnistria. But this is absolutely nonsense, because there are more Russians living in the capital of Moldova than in Transnistria. So of course, these kind of paradoxes, they are planted in the ground of several independent entities in order to create a falsification or false of the reality. They provide a wrong sense of the realities. What we can do today is to increase the level of attraction of the Republic of Moldova to the ordinary citizens of this region. Out of 500,000 of inhabitants of Transnistria, we have 350,000 of Moldovan citizens already. If you add to this number kids which do not have identity cards and passports, for instance, of course, the largest part of the population, 90% of the population, they are Moldovan citizens. And of course, we do have a responsibility. We have to pay their pensions, even if they do not contribute to the social budget or to the pensionary budget. So we have to be smarter, and we have to provide more incentives and institutions to attract the population into the body of the constitution constitutional body of the Republic of Moldova. You can recognize this personality, of course. And in the meantime, in the last decades of permanent instability of Transnistria, Russian Federation has invested a lot into Transnistria. Money, also geopolitical capital. And since you are learning political sciences, you know that political capital is sometimes even more than money. And of course, Russians do not want to lose face, retreating from the region or just providing it as a gift to the independent Moldova, because they will consider it as a defeat. And in military terms, this is not very much acceptable. And of course, we are looking for solutions for creating a retreat, a civilized retreat of the Russian Federation from the region, while having an opportunity or a special generous offer to the local population. In the meanwhile, however, Transnistrian economy, which is fully subsidized by the Russian Federation, has accumulated 4.5 billion of dollars in debts. Simply they use Russian gas and they do not pay for it. Well, some people will say this is a very good illustration of communism. But they do not live in communism. And Putin himself do not believe in communism. They believe in strong force and in strong hand, which can keep under control the situation. In the last years, in 2006, we benefited from a very good response from the Ukrainian government, and we have introduced EUBAM, Border Monitoring Mission, at the border with Ukraine, which allows us to control the flows of goods between Ukraine and Moldova, including Transnistria. In the last couple of years, more than 1,000 enterprises and plants from Transnistria registered themselves in Moldova as legal entities of Moldova, which in exchange provide them a possibility for Transnistrian business to trade with European Union. This is good for the people and this is good for the business, and they feel themselves as integrated to the economical space. As you can see, the geography changed and also changed the potential of the Russian Federation. If in 1990, USSR was the world's largest country and having up to, what is it? It accounted for 5.47% of the world's population. Now, of course, the figures dropped significantly, not in terms of territory, but in terms of GDP and in terms of population. This is the offer of the Russian Federation. The political offer is called Russian Euro-Asian Union. It appeared immediately when, after the European Union launched the Eastern Partnership Initiative as a kind of counter-offer. Of course, you can say that this is just games, but these games have a political caliber. If being supported by administration in Kremlin, it is largely advertised and popularized through political channels, through mass media, through business connections. And of course, as you can see, the most important battle for the survival or for the implementation of the European Euro-Asian Union is struggled in Ukraine. Without Ukraine, Euro-Asian Union cannot survive. It is not feasible. But of course, Moldova is also part of the targets, or is a target, is a site for this battle. What is the reason beyond the Euro-Asian Union? Russians want to regain the control over its neighborhood, and it wants to have an impact in the global stance, having less resources for that, and using only strong force against the European Union, which is using a lot of soft power. Soft power has the important meaning that it has more legitimacy in the eyes of the population. Strong power usually creates and projects more opposition from the population. And this is one of the most important troubles or problems that is confronting the Russian Federation. Okay. I will I'll make a synthesis of the main finding because I understand that you have to go very soon. European neighborhood policy is intended to change the neighbors by purpose, by defining clear opportunities for the population and the elites. In fact, the Eastern Partnership policy of the European Union replicate what was done with the previous waves of enlargement, even if the European Union does not call it an enlargement policy. We hope that in the declaration, in the statement of the Vilnius summit in November, they will also project a sentence about the perspective of integration, perspective of joining Europe sometimes, because this is a very important incentive for the population and elites in our countries. Therefore, the Vilnius summit will be very important for us. Russian opposition only creates additional waves of protest in our countries. European Union soft power policy produced real changes and in the minds of the population. I have not spelled it out, but more than 60% of the population favor an integration with the European Union, which means that the public supports the policy of the governments. Successful association creates a lot of benefits in terms of market access, but also it creates a lot of potential for developing national capabilities in the economical sphere and also in the educational sphere. Integration to the European Union is not an end of transition. Even inside of the European Union, we will have to adapt ourselves, and we will have to be very creative in order to remain competitive with other states of the European Union. But nevertheless, it will provide a sense of security for us. And as you can understand, security is a very important element of the identity. You can feel safe and protected when you are guaranteed that you are on the right track. Of course, the European Union operates with no discounts. It will not, it does not believe in words. Only the results of the implemented reforms may prove to the Brussels, to the European Union bodies, that Moldova is really willing to integrate itself. And this is a lot of space for homework, and this is a lot of energy that is requested from the elites and from the population. I hope I have rounded up my presentation in a positive way. I expect that you may have some questions, and I'm eager to respond to it.
We have just about 7 minutes for questions. We'd invite the bull to jump up and form a line here on the left to ask your questions. Please tell us your name and what you're studying, and the floor is yours to ask the question. Go ahead.
Yes, I had a question. When we tried to go from Rezina to Transnistria, we were interviewed for about 45 minutes by the Russian officials, and I wondered if maybe they have some nuclear warheads in Transnistria, and that's one of the reasons they're trying to maintain control of that region. Do you have any feel for that?
Well, there are no any nuclear or warheads in Transnistria, but the Russian Federation, they are guarding the status quo of the region. They do not allow foreigners to enter into the region as they would wish. Therefore, they use passport controls in order to create a sense of, security for the inhabitants of the region. They try to harass simply Westerners coming to this region. They usually block the location where they store ammunition from the OSCE missions, because they do not want to reveal the truth that they still keep a lot of armory in the region. Formerly, the ammunition in the region was loaded from Eastern Germany. So all the Kalashnikov and the tanks and cannons which were brought from Eastern Germany were uploaded in Transnistria, and this is the reason why they do not want to leave. So it's an artifice, an artificial expression of keeping the region under the track of the Russian Federation. Yep.
Hi. The American people have Madeline Airy. I'm an international relations major. And the American people have donated or invested about $300 million in Moldova. And what has been done with that money?
Thank you very much. You mean the MCC, Millennium Challenge Account, $262 million. Half of the amount is used today for the finalization of the road construction, and half of the money out of this pledge to the Moldovan government is used for agriculture purpose, for amelioration, for melioration. It is used to increase the level of supply of water to the farmers. As you can understand, in the first decade of transition, which was one of the most painful and spinous to us, we succeeded in transforming the property from the collective farms to individual farmers that own their land plots. But it was not enough. We had to create infrastructure for their access to the market and also for becoming more competitive than they were in the Soviet Union. Just to give you an example, in the Soviet time, 60% of the population of Moldova worked in the agriculture. But the profitability of these activities were extremely low. In order to be competitive in the European market, for instance, we need to increase the quality of the infrastructure. And we are very grateful to the American people, which provided through MCC, Millennium Challenge Account, this level of support. Of course, we do not sleep on our ears, as it is an expression in Romanian. We have to develop quite a lot of additional incentives for the farmers to become more influential in the regional market.
My name is Andy Mickelson. I'm an Ancient Near Eastern Studies major. As you mentioned, Russia has kind of held the threat to limit or cut off natural gas imports to Moldova. I'm just curious, how would Moldova respond if that were the case? Where would they look, I guess, to replace that supply?
Very good question. Of course, gas, they have experienced very harsh instruments in Ukraine in 2007, 2008, the winter crisis. Right now, of course, we have been affected by the gas crisis in 2007, 2008. Right now, we are building alternative pipelines with Romania, Iași-Ungheni, which has the potential, first of all, to provide an additional instrument of negotiations with Gazprom. And secondly, we really expect that in 2 years from now, Romania will have enough shale gas resources, because Chevron, Exxon, and many others, they explore the resources which are in Romania. And Romania traditionally was a very important source for oil and gas. It is full of resources. But of course, we need not only to look at the infrastructures as a gift, but also apply and implement the European Union acquis communautaire in the energy field. One of the most important blows or failures of Gazprom in Europe is that the European Union started to implement a legislation which is called the third package, so-called third package, that is creates obligations for the suppliers of gas to cut off properties between transporters of gas, distributors of gas, and into three elements of the transportation of gas. And this creates important obligations for Gazprom. They are not very eager to follow, but they will be obligated in order to trade with European Union. Sometimes Russia say that, European Union will not be able to adopt harsher policy in Russia because they are dependent on our gas. But this is vice versa. This is also, it has a reason to look from another perspective. if Russia wants to export, someone should be interested to buy it. And of course, there are Norwegian supplies, there are Algerian supplies, there are shale gas supplies coming from Poland that will substitute the resources coming from the Russian Federation. I do not want to create a false impression that I have something against the Russian business. But it should be according to the international standards, and it should be according to the regulations of the WTO. Thank you.
My name's Ryan. I'm a Middle Eastern Studies major. You kind of touched on my question when he asked it, but I couldn't help but notice that as you were speaking, you would say, we will be joining the European Union. It sounds like it's a set-in-stone decision. And I'm just wondering if you expect any other backlashes from the Russian government, apart from the gas and wine restrictions that have been in place.
Thank you very much. A very precise question. Of course, we have experienced it, as Ukraine experienced it, a number of trade embargoes. The first one was in 2006, when Russia embargoed our wines. Of course, it's not easy to speak about wine in such an environment. But you may understand that if this is an important product for exports, it is quite an important element of our national interest. And they have wanted to punish us for the introduction of the EUBAM in EUBAM border monitoring mission at the line with Ukraine. The response was that if in 2006 we were exporting 60% of our wines to Russia, now we export 20%. The rest went to West, to the Western Europe, Central Europe, and also in China. We opened up a very interesting market for us in China, with wine growing plantations, with sellers of wine, and with a diversified network of shops there. In 2013, in August, they've started with chocolate from Ukraine. Again, suddenly Onishchenko, who is the head of the Rospotrebnadzor, the sanitary inspection of the Russian Federation, said that these chocolates are not good. Why? Because I don't care. In September, they said, well, the wines are not good from Moldova. Why? Because I don't care. And the same. Recently, they have started to embargo apples, prunes, and other vegetables from Moldova. It is not easy, but every step, every blow that we are receiving from the Russian Federation creates disincentives to trade with this country. And there are plenty of international markets which will accept our quality products. And the fact that we are internalizing the regulations and standards of the European Union is a very good, in fact, investment into the quality of the products, into the quality of the agro-processing industry in Moldova. And even if we will have damages and estimated damages from this recent embargo is calculated at around $60 million, just a gift to Mr. Onishchenko. But in a mid-term, this will be an investment in our projection of our market, let's say, resources to stable markets. Also, it should be mentioned, and this is very important, that in 2013, we received a very strong support from the European Union all around, all the trade commissioner, agriculture commissioner, integration commissioner, which are the highest officials of the European Union. They voiced out support for Moldova. They said this behavior of the Russian Federation is unacceptable. This is not a civilized behavior. And they have invited all the bodies of the European Commission, which is the executive of the European Union, to expand the market to the Moldovan products, and also to Borjomi in Georgia, to chocolate in Ukraine, adapting the market of Europe to small and, let's say, emerging partners. This is why I'm very confident that the agreement with the European Union will be signed up. This will provide large benefits to our producers and manufacturers. And this will create a deep sense of community between Moldova and the European Union. Today, our language is an official language of the European Union, because Romanian, and I am very grateful for the prayer that just did a wonderful expression of support to us. Being an official language of the European Union, we can expect friendly steps and friendly signs from the European Union. European Parliament is supporting us. So this is the logical trajectory of the integration. Public support, elites' determination, and open doors. Thank you.